The hardest one is the Nisu. Let me show you the hieroglyphs for the entire phrase, and then you'll probably figure it out. The Nisu is the first two hieroglyphs. The sedge plant was called the sut plant in ancient Egypt. It was feminine, and thus the loaf tea. Later, it became synonymous with the word for king, as in king of Upper and Lower Egypt. And thus we have a non-feminine word, king, with a T in it. The T is usually not pronounced. The word for king comes first because of honorific placement. The next hieroglyph is our Hotep sign, and usually it means to be pleased, but here it really means an offering, the thing that pleases the gods. The last hieroglyph is the D, to give. So the phrase meant something like, may the king make an offering. The idea was that you were a member of the court, and you hoped the king would make offerings to the gods on your behalf. Over the centuries, the prayer would vary a bit, but it always began, Hotep di Nisu, may the king give an offering, even if you weren't a member of the court and had never known the king. Let's look at the next section of the prayer. May the king give an offering to whom? Yes, Osiris. And that makes sense. He's the god of the dead, and you want him pleased, so he'll accept you into the next world. Note that often his name is written without the god determinative. Then come two hieroglyphs we have seen. The Netcher flag, which means God, and that's followed by the Ah hieroglyph, which means great. So Osiris is being called the great god. The Neb hieroglyph, Lord, is then followed by a city we've seen in our homework, Abydos, the sacred city where Osiris was buried. So Osiris is also Lord of Abydos. Abydos was so sacred that every Egyptian wanted to make a pilgrimage there to make an offering to Osiris. Now, let's look at the next section of the prayer. Well, we start with a verb, to give. Then we have the suffix pronoun viper, so it's he gives. Actually, as you'll see in a minute, it's so he may give. Okay, what's he giving? Well, that nice little arrangement of 4 hieroglyphs around the house translates as vocal offerings of bread and beer. The house hieroglyph, I think, represents the tomb. The tall, thin hieroglyph within it is the or. That was part of the word for voice, cheru. So it's an abbreviation for voice. Something said in the tomb is a prayer. Also, the reason it's a voice offering is that you didn't actually have to physically offer the things. You could just say it, and it was so. Now, on the left side of the or is bread, and on the right, a jug of beer. So it's a voice offering of bread and beer. It's like when we say meat and potatoes to mean food. This combination of 4 hieroglyphs is called a pertcheru, a voice offering. Now, let's see what other offerings are there. The next 2 are easy. They're ideograms, oxen and fowl. The loop of a chord is an SHS biliteral and means alabaster. So one of the offerings will be alabaster jars of oils. The other hieroglyph, what looks like 2 vertical poles, is supposed to be a strip of cloth with fringes, and it's a kind of shorthand for clothing. The full word was pronounced menchet and was written like this. So far, we have, may the king give an offering to Osiris, the great god, Lord of Abydos. May he give a voice offering of bread and beer, oxen and fowl, alabaster and clothing. Now for our next line of the prayer. The first word we know, chet, which means thing. That's followed by neb, which can mean all, every, or Lord. Since it's following thing, it probably means all or every. I bet you noticed the loaf T under the neb sign. I also bet you realized it's there because chet is feminine and the adjective all has to agree with it. Good. What's our next word? Yes, the nepher sign, meaning good or beautiful. Here I think good is the best choice. You'll see. The next word is one of my favorites. It's a monogram, a word made up of two hieroglyphs conjoined like Siamese twins. Monograms appear occasionally, and you can usually figure out the meaning. This one is a water jar on top of the foot B. The word was pronounced wab and means pure. There was an order of priests called the wab priests. If you wanted to write wab priest, you just put the man determinative at the end. A wab priest is a man who purifies. Since the deceased is now a god, everything he ate, the offerings, had to be purified. As part of the wab priest's duties, he would purify the altar on which the offerings were placed, the food, the dishes containing the food. Everything had to be pure. This was done by pouring water over everything while a prayer was recited. Okay, what's our next word? Yes, ankh, to live, or life. We'll decide which one later. Next? Yes, netcher, the flag, meaning God. Okay, next? Im. That's the word for therein. Let's see how to translate this section. We'll get a running start at it by going back to the beginning. May the king grant an offering to Osiris, the great god, Lord of Abydos. May he give a voice offering of bread and beer, cattle and fowl, alabaster and clothing, all things good and pure upon which the god lives therein. When we translate, we usually leave out the therein. We really don't need it in English. You're doing very well, but you're not done yet. There's one last section of the prayer. What do you think the first three hieroglyphs say? It's good to remember the context. It's a funerary prayer. Also remember what came just before. A list of offerings. So, of the first three hieroglyphs, I think the ka biliteral, the upraised arms, stands out clearest. It's the word for soul. So the phrase will be, to the soul of. The next word is imachi, the venerated one, the deceased. And then we get his name. Ramses, with a god determinative indicating he's dead. This Ramses isn't the king. He's a commoner. That's followed by an epithet we have seen before. True of voice, meaning he's deceased, and the gods have declared him truthful, worthy of entering into the next world. Once again, let's read the entire prayer. It's good practice. May the king grant an offering to Osiris, the great god, Lord of Abydos. May he give a voice offering of bread and beer, cattle and fowl, alabaster and clothing, all things good and pure, upon which the god lives, to the ka of the venerated one, Ramses, true of voice. This prayer was probably recited millions of times in front of tombs throughout Egypt.